We're in for an extraordinary afternoon. And to start it off, ladies and gentlemen, here's Wendell.
Thank you very much. As usual in the events like this, something turns up at the last minute that we want to share with you, and that has happened today. We have a gentleman that came into the building here last night, as a matter of fact. He's shown us a free energy device. He got the idea after a visit to Switzerland with Billy Meier and some contact with Pleiadian entities. And so we're going to start out by introducing Mr. George Green, and then we'll bring his demonstration up on the screen here so you all can see it. This will only take a couple minutes, and then we'll proceed on from there. So one other thing I want to advise, I want you to all know that we are videotaping the audience for reaction today. I hope you don't mind. If anybody objects, come up and let us know. And but we need this to cut audience impressions into the editing at a later time. So cameras are on you. Thank you very much. And George Green.
Thank you, Wendell. I was asked to give you guys a little indication of how I got involved with the Billy Meier story. I will give it to you real quick. In 1958, I was stationed in the military at Edwards Air Force Base. I did the post-flight inspection one morning on the X-15. I finished doing that, went to the north end of the runway. There was 3 hangars that I hadn't got into. Inside was a circular disc about 25 feet across, silver in color, a little unusual. I was 19 years old, but I had just been working on the super secret equipment that we had. I come back and asked my CO about it, and he said it was an ion-powered craft designed by Sikorsky for use in outer space. I accepted what he said because it made sense. I went back and asked my friend, who happened to be the base photographer, to get me some pictures of that craft. And he said, what did they tell you? I told him, and they basically said that's not true. Proceeded to show me pictures of the 2 dead aliens, who were humanoid-looking, but obviously not me. So I immediately went back and confronted my commander and asked him why he didn't tell me the truth. And he said, when the government's ready to tell the truth about UFOs and ETs, they will. Until then, you'll stick to that story. I was reminded that that weekend was Armed Forces Day, which they opened up the base, and if any of the civilians would happen to see the craft, I was also supposed to give them the Sikorsky information. Anyway, within 10 days, I was transferred off the base. I didn't say another word about it. I was a good, if you want to call it, a military person. I spent a little over 4.5 years, got in, got out of the service, became pretty successful in the game of Monopoly. I have a background in law, business, real estate development. I've built in 22 states. My last real estate project was $100 million. In 1984, I built a $1 million house up in Aspen, and the housekeeper had a book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades. You remember that, the picture book? I looked at those pictures. They were incredible because they were exactly the same thing I had seen 25 years before. So I grabbed my plane the next day. I flew down and I talked to Lee and Britt Elders in Phoenix, which they said they were investigating a man in Switzerland with Wendell Stevens who claimed to be in contact with beings from the star system, the Pleiades, and gave me some more of the information. And I said, well, I don't know about your story. I'm building real estate projects. But I know that picture's real. I said, what can I do? And they said, well, we need money. And I said, that's not a problem. I'll tell you, give me your proposition, which they did. So I put up the money. And 90 days later, they welched on their contract, frankly. And so what I did is file suit against them. But I was so enamored in the suit, I then grabbed a plane and I flew to Zurich, Switzerland. I knocked on the door at Billy's house. He lives about a 45-minute drive outside. And Lady Bain Bruni answered the door, and I introduced myself as George Green. I put up the money for their projects in the United States. And she says, we don't know you. All Americans are crooks. And I says, what do you mean? I says, you're supposed to be getting money from over there. That's what they told me. Well, they claimed they had never got any. I can't verify that or not. I said, look, I'm just here. I have some questions. I want to know. I have the ability and the money to help get the information out if that's necessary. Anyway, they came back about 10 minutes later and said, I'm sorry, Billy's not seeing anybody. I says, hey, end of story. My wife and I are going to take off. We're going over to Austria and have a vacation. Where's the closest hotel? So they gave it to me. Methuselah, what is that? Weila's about 15 minutes? Anyway, we went over to Weila, got a hotel, And the next morning, Bruni's knocking on my door and delivered me a 2-page message from the commander of the spacecraft, supposedly Quetzal. And it was about me personally with information that nobody on this planet knew about. Got my attention, and we come back over the next week, and frankly got my mind blown, and I made an agreement with the ETs basically to publish the information, subject to me getting rid of that contract that he had signed with Lee Elders. So I flew back to the United States, talked to my attorneys, which were the attorneys for the Screen Actors Guild. I had a house in Beverly Hills at that time, too. And it gave them the job to try to break the contract. We had it all set up. And we got Billy on the phone and told him, look, we got the thing set up. All you have to do is fly over here to the United States. Methuselah will tell you a little bit more about it later, but basically what occurred in that meeting with my attorneys, and we were talking to Billy in Switzerland, is Billy had, when I was there, had shown me pictures of San Francisco and the West Coast going under that he had taken pictures of. He says, I knew it was going to occur sometime in the future. I'm safe and I have 3 children. I'm not leaving Switzerland. At that point, I said, look, I got a problem. I'm in the courts all the time. I'm a real estate developer. Everybody sues real estate developers. So I said, I don't want to get involved with this thing. We'll try to set it up. There's got to be another way. So then I flew down and talked to Wendell. And Wendell, of course, couldn't do anything about it. He had other projects going on at that time, but I did agree to help him on some of his other projects and publish his material. Well, how did this all equate is, when we were there, we agreed to, with the extraterrestrials, to assist them in getting information out. When, I think Methuselah, are you going to show pictures of the wedding cake? Okay, during that time and later on, since we left there, I've been involved with the Pleiadians who are in contact with them indirectly. They've been having their spacecraft follow us around. I mean, you know, I made a deal. So what happens is that we come to the point and started looking at different devices, and that's where I'm going to shut down. I got a long story I could tell you, but we're not going to do it today. What we're looking at the wedding cake, there was, if you start looking at it for ideas of how the propulsion of these craft are and how do they run. Well, to make it simple, you set up magnetic fields. And Pat Bailey's here, who's a physicist, and we were talking about it earlier. I've run across several what we call over-unity devices. And to make it real simple so you people can see what it is, I'm going to show a demonstration now. It's on that little table over here. Now, simply what it is, everybody's familiar with refrigerator magnets. You know the little magnets that have them on top of them? You know, little animals that you put on to put your papers on them. We'll take off all the animals and you have a little square, and they're all positive and they're all negative on one side. Now, I guess I should walk over and see if that works out.
We're going to bring the images up on the screen so you'll be able to see it a lot better. It's going to be on camera. Okay. Come over to the podium to explain the part, and then we'll go back there for the screen demonstration.
Okay, I'll do it this way. This is a simple PVC, plastic vinyl. It's an old, plastic vinyl tube. We just cut it down to about 1 inch, which is the size of these little black magnets, as you've seen them. They're all glued in. They're all the same direction, the north and the south. All one side is south, other one's the north. But you're going to notice something. I don't know if you can see it or not, you will in a minute when they do the videos, there's a little hole in it. That gives the ability then from the magnet to be a horseshoe magnet itself. So we got 2 magnets within each other. Now what we also have, I want you to look at this because when you see the wedding cake, you're going to see these big round balls around the outside of it, but there's a big space. You can imagine it when you can see this thing. Now it's connected to another what we call a round magnet basically. It's just a flat banged in on both sides. Now what I've done is glue just a plain old steel ball, the old pinballs, to the bottom so you can get an idea of what it is. End of story. Now you want to see what happens. Now what you have to do is start thinking of the possibilities by using a simple device this. We were looking at doing it commercially, which we do have it done, but the people that put it together originally have been shot at a couple times and it's not right. So why don't we make a toy so everybody can at least think about it? Do you understand? Okay, now I'll go make the thing so you can see how it works.
Okay, now we'll bring it up on the screen. You notice the gap that he has in the magnets, in the ring of magnets. And he's going to put that ring down over the other slice of a bar magnet glued onto a ball. We're going to have it on the screen here. If you watch up here, And when he does this and gets it centered, the ball is the little ball inside, and the disc will revolve by themselves, and they'll revolve perpetually. It's being done strictly by magnetic power. There you can see it, which tells us that free energy is infinitely simple. It's just the interrelationship of magnetic fields, and that's what he's demonstrating. Thank you, George. Okay, this time I'm going to do things. Did you get to see it? Okay, going to do things a little bit differently. I usually have a list of things that I'm going to do. This time it's going to be pretty much extemporaneous because I'm going to tell you some things that we never published. We don't like to introduce ourselves into a case, and so we didn't publish what was happening to us as we were investigating the case. And one would think that we would be pretty free to do what we wanted to do, which wasn't the case. We were picked up every single time by American intelligence. Now I'm going to walk around a little bit so I don't get all in one place, if that's okay here. When I went to Switzerland the first time with a lady friend that was psychic. Billy Meier had been living in Hinwil, Switzerland, a little town south in the southern part of south of Lake Zurich, and we did not have an address. I had a mail address, but it was in Hinwil, and he had moved. So we had gotten our income tax refund back, and we bought cheap tickets on Laker Airlines to go to London and then the train back up to Switzerland. Now, Laker Airlines didn't have a schedule at that time. They sold tickets till they filled an airplane, the airplane took off. So here we are now. We're going to go, and if anybody's following us, he's certainly going to have a hard time. But I don't think they were following us that time. But that's the way it worked. And when we got to Switzerland, we got off got to Zurich. We rented a car, and we headed out for Hinwil, trying to find where Meier lived now. We knew that he lived at a place called Hinterschmidruti, but very few Swiss knew where Hinterschmidruti was, because that means behind Schmidruti. And we were looking for, we thought we were probably mispronouncing it, that we were looking for a town of that name, and we kept getting wrong directions until we finally found little board signs with arrows on them that said Schmidruti. And we went to Schmidruti, and when we got there, we asked them where Hinterschmidruti, they said, just back there. So we said, what's back there? They said, take the road down. It was a dirt road running from, Hinterschmidruti is a crossroads with no more than 8 or 10 buildings in it. That's a town. And they said, go down the dirt road. He said, do you know where Mr. Meier lives? I said, oh, yes, he gets his mail right here. Here's the post office. Just go down the road. There's the first house on the left. So we went down there, walked down the trail, and got there, and sure enough, we were at Mr. Meier's house. So the next time, and I talked to him for that, well, I talked to an interpreter at that time because I didn't know any German, and at that point, I'm going to have to back up again here, because the first time we went there, and I had this lady friend that thought she was psychic, and I had been corresponding. I want to get this real straight because I want it to be fact. And after the first visit, well, I'm going to have to back up a little bit more, because how I got involved, and I'm sorry for the confusion here, but I had been exchanging and collecting UFO pictures for years. And one of my correspondents was Lou Zinstag. She was the niece of Carl Jung. She was the first UFO researcher well recognized in her part of Europe. She published the first UFO journal in Europe on UFOs in German, published in Basel. So I had been in contact with her exchanging pictures, and she called me one day and she said, I have just discovered a set of pictures I think you will find very interesting, and I'm going to come to the United States next month because I'm writing a book together with Timothy Good on the Adamski case. And she said, we're going to have to come to California anyway, and if you'll meet us at the bus station when we come through, I'll show you the pictures. So I said, fine, let me know when you're in New York, and I'll meet you. And I did, brought him out to the house. Happened to be Lee and Britt Elders were at my house at the time that I got the call there at the bus station. I went down and picked him up, brought him back out, Timothy Good and Lou Zinstag. And when we got to the house, she opened her purse and spread out 12 photographs. She says, what do you think of these? those pictures were the best pictures I had ever seen of UFOs. And up to that time, I had come to believe that a very good picture was very suspect because most of the pictures were taken with cheap cameras with no preparation, happenstance that occurred suddenly, an accidental picture, and posed pictures were clearly fakes. But they were so good and so pretty, I wanted to believe that they were true, and I wanted to get more information on them. So I asked her if she could put me in touch with the author of the pictures, and she said, well, he doesn't speak any English, so if you write me the letter you want to send to him, I'll translate it to German, send it to him, have him send the reply back, and I'll translate that back to English and get you the answer. Well, I did this 2 or 3 times in quick succession, and she said, oh, my, you're overwhelming me. I'm going to have to ask you to use a friend of mine. And she gave me the name of Ilse von Jacobi, who was also an international journalist, spoke, read, and was fluent in 5 languages. Ilse von Jacobi translated 2 or 3 more letters for this way, and by this time I've got to go see Mr. Meier face to face, and then the income tax refund arrived in the mail, and I told my friend, I said, let's go. So we took an airplane out to Los Angeles, waited at the airplane, bought Laker tickets, waited at the airport, got on the airliner and went, and now we're in Zurich where we rented the car. And my friend was psychic to some degree. Ilse von Jacobi said she was psychic. We got no map. We don't know where we're going. So we start out with the car, and we get to Winterthur. We know that's on the way to Hinwil. And from Winterthur down, I said, I'm driving. I said, which road do we take? And Ilse von Jacobi said, take that one. So we went down that road, no signs, and went several miles and came to another fork. I said, which one? They thought a minute. How about that one? And so we took that turn. We did this 4 or 5 times. We came to a little town called Dushnang. And I said, when are we going to get there? And at the end of Dushnang, there was another little sign that said Schmidruti and pointed to a road that wound up the hill. And so we took that road and drove up there, and that's where we drove into Schmidruti. Now, there's no big sign that says the city of Schmidruti or anything like that. We stopped at the intersection there to ask them where Schmidruti was. They said, here. And it says, where's Hinter Schmidruti? And he said, back there. So that's how we got to Mr. Meier's house. Now, I've got my interpreter, who has been translating my mail with me. That was Ilse von Jacobi. And at this point, I still think that I'm going to have to work through an interpreter because I hadn't had any English from Billy, and the letters were all translated. So we got to the house. They had cordially invited us in to sit down at the table in the kitchen there. It was a big oak door with heavy legs on the corners. And Billy sat down, and across from us, they gave us a cup of coffee, and I turned to my translator, nodded for her to translate, looked at Billy and said, I am very pleased to finally get here and look you in the eye. I have some important questions I'd like to ask. He says, you may ask anything you like, Mr. Stevens, just like that. So I turned to my translator. I said, I thought you said he didn't speak English. He said, I didn't think he did. So after that, our communication was in English, and I said to Billy, I says, how long have you been speaking English? He says, I speak very little, but if you speak slowly, we can talk. And our communication was in English, slowly, with simple words like that, which over time grew rapidly. We got quite fluent with each other. But I asked him, I said, how did you take these pictures? And he told me. I says, did you ever make any fake pictures, false pictures? He says, oh, no, Mr. Stevens, you don't need to make false pictures. He says, we have our truth. And the thing that impressed me most about Mr. Meier, he was the most sincere person I had met up to that time. He's sitting across the table from me, and I'm looking right in his eyes when I'm asking him pointed questions. He doesn't look away. No changes in his face. His expression, he looks right back and answers them very forthrightly. And he told me about some of the pictures that he had taken, showed me many more pictures. And the quality of the pictures was disarming. They were so good, and I kept insisting, how do you get such good pictures? And he said, very easy. He says, the ships move slowly. I said, you mean they don't zip off? They're there a minute and zip off? No, he says they just fly very slowly, and I take the pictures. Later I found that the pictures were actually posed so he could get good photographs for another very specific reason. But I want to go back now to the second time I went over there, I tried to find somebody that could help me investigate the case. I was close friends of Coral and Jim Lorenzen. I had keys to the office at APRO. I read their files. I could go down there anytime myself that I wanted to, let myself in and out. And they regarded my photo collection as the APRO photo files, which is fine. They put me on their little newspaper as photo consultant to APRO. When I got back the first time, I checked with them, and I knew that from my relationship with them that APRO didn't have any money to buy tickets for anybody to go anywhere. After I showed them the pictures and told them the story, they wanted to go along, but they didn't have any funding, didn't have any way to go. So I knew that at that time APRO was the biggest and the largest and probably the best funded organization in the country. MUFON grew out of APRO, if you, those of you that are old enough to remember back to those days. But the only other agency that had any money was NICAP, and it was already suspect because we knew that NICAP was organized by 6 retired intelligence officers, and that NICAP was not a private UFO research agency, that it was taking the pressure off people. By this time, people are being intimidated by agents that arrive on scene and threaten them and demand the negatives and the prints. So they were believed to be government agents. So people began to resist turning anything over to those agents. Now NICAP came into being, and they would come around afterwards and say, we are a private research organization, we would like to help you. Still the same bunch, a bunch of intelligence officers using another public front. When that became apparent, they did have the money to help us, but we already knew, at least the ones that were doing this, knew that we might as well have gone to the government and say, give us money to do this. So I'm looking for somebody to help me do this, and I've never joined an organization because I never wanted to be a part of the contest between organizations. And there was many of them that sent me cards, free memberships, and I didn't take them. I'd send the cards back. So I'm a freelancer now, and I need some help. I'm having to go on my own time and money. I have to finance myself, and I was looking for somebody else that could do this, that were investigators to begin with, that had investigative training, that carried international cards. And I found this in the hands of a good friend of mine that I'd been in and out of the jungles of Ecuador many times, Mr. Lee Elders, had a private investigator business in Phoenix, and there's 3 men in the business, and they all carried international private investigator cards because their business was Intercept. Intercept was a business that had no storefront, no big sign. They weren't listed in the telephone book. All of their business was referred to them. And their business was debugging computer systems for banks looking for leaks out of the bank records by somebody else. And if a bank suspected that they were losing something in their administration, they would call around, eventually be referred to Intercept. Intercept would go search the system with special equipment, find the bug, photograph the bug, bring the bank managers in, show it to them, and say, now it's your problem. They get paid well for this and leave. Now, they were doing this internationally. They were doing this for banks in London, for banks in Zurich, for banks in Germany. And by the time I went the second time to Switzerland, again on my own money, and I'm going back, it's only a couple of months after the first time. I got to get more information, more pictures, and I got to talk to Billy some more. And this time he took me over all of the photographic sites one by one and restaged or reenacted the photo sequence so I could see where he stood, how he used his camera. When he kneeled, he kneeled. When he walked, he walked. And this allowed me to give perspective to the series of pictures and also to put them in serial sequence because the slides that I was seeing were not filed in any particular order. They were numbered, but they were also mixed from one roll to another. Anyway, as we went over the sites, the photographic sites, I noticed another thing. Every site we went to had a Pilatus Porter airplane. It's a Swiss Army observation airplane circling overhead. And I asked Billy if that was normal. He says, oh, I see them all the time. He says Switzerland has a lot of military airplanes, and all the civilians are, in effect, military people because they all have an issued gun and they all have a uniform and they all have a place on an organization chart. And so I became convinced, walking over the sites, that it would be difficult to fake most of these pictures because the sites were often remote. Billy got there on a moped. The moped is a small powered motorcycle. It's almost the size of a bicycle. And I was impressed by the approach. One time we had to go through a locked fence to get to a property, the house that the farmer lived on, and then he had to unlock another fence to go through, and the path was up a steep hill, so steep that Billy had to run his moped and push it to get it up the hill at one time. When we took a four-wheel drive Jeep up there, the Jeep stalled, wouldn't make it. So I asked the farmer this time when we're going through, I said, have you ever seen this man before? He says, oh, yes, I've seen him before. Many times? No, once about a year ago, more than that maybe. He said he came through here. He wanted to go through the gate. I let him through, unlocked the gates, let him through, and he came back and unlocked the gates and let him out again. I said, did you notice whether he was carrying anything on his moped? Did he have any luggage on the back? He said he had a little brown bag and a jacket rolled up back there. I think it was his lunch. And he had a camera over his shoulder. And I said, well, did anybody else go up there with him? He said, oh, no. I said, did he have any poles or wires or anything? No, nothing like that. He just his moped. I saw him push it up the hill. And that one, when we got to the top of the hill, the photographic site, where the pictures were taken, another side of the hill rolled steeply down to the valley floor, several hundred feet below that, and a very steep slope. If anybody was to try to suspend something into the scene, they would have had been down over the hill, lifting it up, and you'd take a very long pole to do that. There was no way that anything could be lofted into the scene by being tossed. There was no way to suspend it. There's nothing to tie suspension lines to, and he got this remarkable series of pictures. He took 3 or 4 rolls of film on that particular occasion. Another time, he was let through a farmer's property in a rainstorm, and it was wet and muddy, and he had to go through a bunch of cows that had been gathered up in the farmyard to be milked. And again, that man said, no, he didn't have any equipment with him. He was alone. He went through here in the rain up to the site, and that began to look pretty tough to me. So I knew that Lee and Tom were in London on a bank sweep. And after seeing this for a whole day, I got on the phone in Billy's house and called London. They left me numbers and told them, you've got to come over here and see what I've just seen. I'm sure that you'll agree that these pictures could not have been faked by anybody, considering the positions they were taken from, the camera that was being used, the access to the sites, and all of that sort of thing. So they finally agreed at the end of their bank sweep to come over and meet me 2 days later at Billy's house. They did, and we went out and went over the sites again, and they agreed that it would be pretty tough to fake any of these pictures at that time, especially since he was a one-armed man using a broken camera, and he was operating alone. Nobody ever saw Confederates. Nobody ever saw anybody helping him. So at that point, they agreed that this might be a very interesting case to get into, and they would join me and finance their own trips back and forth. So we're all doing this on our own money. Now, I got to tell you right now that I would never have gone the second time, third time, or fourth time at any point if I had ever suspected that there was some faking being done or that it was being hoaxed. I would have terminated it right there because I don't like to spend my money chasing hoaxes. And that never happened. And it never happened with them either. So we kept on. And by the time we decided to go back the third time for me and the second time for Lee and Tom, we have talked to each other over the telephone about the trip maybe 3 times. And when we got out to California that time, we bought Laker tickets again, their cheapest ones then, and we got on the next scheduled airline. Whoa, let me back up here. After we had agreed that we would go back together a third time, and we now resolved to do it, and we're making our plans. A few days after this, 10 days to 2 weeks, Lee got a letter in the mail. Now, Lee hasn't been involved in this up to this time except to meet me in Switzerland, all on European territory, and go back to London. But here he receives a letter in the mail on blue parchment with a nice silver crest in the upper left-hand corner. It says Knights Templars of Malta, and an address for them in London. And he opened it, and inside was a 1-paragraph short letter that said, and on more blue parchment with the silver crest on the top of the page. The crest is the Knights Templars of Malta, and the letter was a short letter, says, "I believe we have interests in common. Would you please give us a call before you leave?" And was signed Mark Nathan, Secretary General of the Knights Templars of Malta. So he called me and told me about the letter, read it to me, and he said, "If you'll meet me at Picacho, I'll show it to you." So I drove up to Picacho, and he drove down to Picacho, and we looked at the letter, and we discussed it, and he says, "Why do we need them? What do we have in common with them?" I said, "We don't need them. We don't want them. Forget the letter." So we forgot it. We continued with our plans. 2 weeks later, he got another letter in the mail. This one had a gold crest in the corner, and it said House of Commons and an address in London. On the inside was the same message, saying you didn't respond to the previous message, and we think it's very urgent that you get in touch with us immediately, or if it's too late, contact us when you arrive in London, and left a telephone number. First one had a telephone number in it, too. We decided not to respond to that one also, because we don't need any help. We don't want any interference. We don't know what the House of Commons would be doing in this. Also, that letter was signed Mark Nathan, Secretary something, Secretary before the rod is for the House of Lords. There's a special General Secretary, I think it is. Can you help me, Ken? What's the Secretary, the head Secretary for the House of Commons? Secretary General? Anyway, Mark Nathan again. Same name, same signature, same content, and he wants us to get in touch with him. Well, we decided to ignore that one too, and a few days later we went to Los Angeles, got on the Laker airliner. As I said, there's no schedule. Flew to London. There was no way anybody could know which airliner we were on unless they were with us. We got off at Heathrow Airport and got our baggage and walked down to the subway and caught the next subway out to London. And the subways leave every 5 minutes, so we could have been on any subway. And we got into Victoria Station downtown, London, and walked up the stairs to get a taxi we had located a walk-up rooms out of London on $10 a day by Fromer, and made a call and had a reservation in a house owned by an old artillery gunner, retired, and he had one of these little row houses, spiral stairs like that, 4 stories high, and he was holding a room for us. And we called him when we got to the station, to the airport, told him we were in town and we'd be there soon. So we come up the stairs at Victoria Station to catch a taxi, and there's a big black taxi driver. Not a lot of black taxi drivers in London, but there was this big guy. He was a big, tall, heavy-shouldered guy. And at Victoria Station, all the taxis line up outside. You have to take the head taxi, and then they move up that way. So here's this guy inside the terminal. He came up to Lee Elders, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "You Mr. Elders?" He said, "Yes. Who are you?" And the man says, "I've got your taxi out here." And he led us out and around this other screaming taxi drivers to another taxi parked on a side street behind the building. And we were thinking, gee, what kind of a taxi is this? He's not in line. Who are they? And he opened the doors, and we got in, and I started to tell him, we want to go down to Kensington. We've got a reservation down here. He says, "I know." Put the car in gear and started driving, and he drove around some streets and pulled up on the side of the big square in London. He had a place called Hyde Park. The Grosvenor House on the south side of Hyde Park. He pulled up there. There's only one place for a taxi to park, and he parked in that spot, got out, motioned for us to get out, and he locked the taxi. And now, the doorman didn't say anything about this. There's a uniformed doorman there also, and he motioned for us to come in the building. We went in with him. There was some other people sitting there in the lobby, and we said, "What about the baggage?" He said, "Don't worry about it. They'll watch it." And we were really worried now. So he takes us to the elevator. He says, the boss wants to meet you. Well, we think the boss is a taxi company. What's he doing in a hotel like this, you know? This hotel, the Grosvenor House Hotel, the Grosvenor House Hotel is a hotel that movie stars live in. Very expensive apartments. So he takes us up to the 5th floor in the elevator. We get out and we go down a corridor to about the 3rd door on the left, and he knocked a little code knock, like, and the door opened, and a round face with glasses looked out. They said something we didn't hear, and the door opened further. They slid a chain, the door opened further, and we're in something like a wet bar. There was just a small hot plate stove. There was a refrigerator. There was a sink, and not much in there, and a door at the end of it. He went to the door and opened it, said something, and then motioned for us to come and go through the door. So we walked through, and beyond the door was a big living room, and it had a 4-cushion sofa on one side here to the right as you went in the door, with a big heavy oak coffee table in front, and a 3-cushion sofa here with another coffee table in front. And he was sitting across in the corner. These were all facing big picture windows, 8 feet by 10 foot picture windows. The whole wall was glass, and his chair was sitting in the corner. It was one of those big black leather chairs with soft arms and round back. And this chair was in the corner, and on each side was a table, matching table. One table had a red telephone on it, and the other one had a white telephone on it. So he sits down. He motioned for us to sit down, and I did. And Lee and Britt sat over on the other 3-cushion sofa. And I had just sat down, and he was starting to sit down when the white telephone rang 10 short rings. Now, we had learned up to this time that the way the signal used by the plate is to tell Meier that he wasn't imagining what he was getting telepathically, was to ring his telephone 10 short rings. Now, if you don't know it, telephones, mechanical telephones like that, cannot ring 10 short rings. They have only 6 lobes on the ringer cams. You can only get combinations of rings of 6 rings, longs or shorts, of 6 rings. So Lee's been working with us all the time, and we asked Billy when we heard it in his house one time what that meant, and he said, "Oh, that's their signaling, letting me know what I'm thinking is them and not my own imagination." So when he had any doubt, Billy's telephone would ring 10 short rings. That would confirm that the telepathic communication he was getting was legitimate and real. So now we're in this guy's office, and he hasn't introduced himself yet. He's just about to say something when the phone rang, picked up the phone and answered, "Hello, hello, hello," nobody on the line. He said, "Just a minute." He dialed the operator. He said, "Did you ring?" She said, "No." He said, "Could anybody have called in from outside?" "Not without going through the switchboard." "Could anybody call this room from any place else in the house?" She said, "Not your room." And he put it down, and he was starting to say, "Wow, that's really strange." And then he introduced himself. He says, "I'm Mark Nathan, the guy that signed the letters." Then the red telephone rang, 10 short rings. This time he picked it up, and the first time when we heard the rings, I looked at Lee, and he looked at me, and we raised our eyebrows. He didn't see that. The second time it rang 10 short rings on the red phone. He grabbed it quick and says, "Hello?" Nobody on that line either. So he says, "Now this is a secure line. This is an intelligence line, very secure." He says it's monitored 24 hours a day, round the clock, 7 days a week, all the time. It has to go through an operator. He says this is not a mechanical connection, and all connections are supervised and recorded. So the operator says, "No, you didn't get any call." He says, "Could anybody else have called in on this line?" "No way." It goes right through here. He says, "And no lights on your switchboard?" Nobody called. Then he put the phone down. We told him what the 10 short rings meant. And then he explained that he was the case officer for the London district. The case officer is the highest-ranking CIA man in that district. And he was the supervisor of all of this. And he told us that he said he knew where we were going. He said, I hoped you would answer the letters, but he said, I really didn't expect you to either. He said, but I'm going to ask you if you will cooperate with us. Would you watch for some certain things if we ask you? We said, what do you want to watch? And they said, well, we know where you're going. You're going back into Switzerland to see Mr. Meier. And they said, the group around Mr. Meier is so small and tight and well known to each other, we haven't been able to get anybody into that group. And so you're going in somehow, and we would like you to look for certain things and then report to us on the way out. Would you be willing to do that? We thought of it a little bit and said, why not? We can't get out of here. We're thinking we can't get out of his office without it anyway. So we agreed to do it. But when we left the office, we never intended to contact him again. And after we got out of his taxi with his pet driver out there, and on our own, we agreed that we would forget the whole thing and we wouldn't talk to them. That's none of their damn business, So we proceeded to Switzerland. And strange things happened on that trip out. We're all three together now, and we take the boat train across to the Dunkirk side, and there's a big line of people at all of the customs gates. And we're standing there at the end of this long line. Looks like it's going to take a time. We have to catch a train after that. And a customs officer in uniform came out of a dark booth, came down to us, tapped Mr. Elders on the shoulder and says, "Come with me," And he just indicated that. We followed him. He went to an empty customs booth, went inside, turned on the light, and motioned for us to come through. So we did, presented our passports. He looked at them, stamped them without even giving them a heavy look. And then he motioned us for us to go on. He came out of the booth, turned out the lights, and walked away. And everybody else in the line just looking at us like, who are they? What did they do? And we're thinking, well, gee, this is great, because now we get a good seat on the train down there. If we were last, we'd have to probably stand up or sit on our baggage. So we got down on the train, picked out a nice compartment, and put our baggage around, and we were comfortable all the way across to France and into Switzerland. These kind of things just seem to happen all the time. There was one time when we came out of Switzerland, and I was carrying 150 pictures I'd gotten from Billy. And we got on we went to Basel on the Swiss train, and they changed trains there. You get off the Swiss train, get on a French train, side by side on the tracks. And this time when we got on the French train, as we came to our car, where our car number was, our compartment number on the car, and we had a car number and a compartment number. As we entered the car, there's a French officer sitting at the end of the car where you go on, blocking the entrance to the car, and he moved his chair back, pulled his legs in, and we went in and sat down. We were waiting for the train to start. It was going to go in about 20 minutes, and we don't hear any other voices in the car with us. So Lee got up and walked down to the end to see if we're on a train that's going to leave, and the police officer said, yes, the car behind us was full of people, and some of them standing up wanting to get in, and the police officer shooing them back. So he went down to the other end of the car, and there was another French officer sitting there blocking that entrance, and people in the other car wanting to get in. And he came back and he says, I don't know what's going on here, but we're the only ones on the car. And he says, they're keeping the others out. I said, well, why don't we just relax and enjoy it? And so we went all the way across France that way, and when we got to Dunkirk, we got off the train. We were the only ones to leave that car, and got on the boat, the ferry across to England again. This time, we could have caught any one of several trains out of Dunkirk, because they leave about every 2 hours. And if we had any kind of a delay, we could be on the following train. And so we get on the train, and we get to London, the Victoria station. When we come up the stairs from the train level in the main terminal there at Victoria, here's the big black taxi driver, and he says, the boss is waiting. And he put us in the same taxi, and he drove us to the same place, Grosvenor House. And this time the guy says, can I see the pictures? Somehow he knew we had pictures. And he handed him the pictures, and he looked at them, and he handed them to another man sitting beside his desk. The man looked at him, and he handed them back to him, and the man handed them to another man that came from outside, and the pictures left the room. And then he introduced us to the other man in the room there. He says, you may recognize this gentleman. He's the man that wears the monocle in the James Bond films. He's an East German intelligence officer. And he's in our intelligence case officer's office. And they're interviewing us on our return out of Switzerland, which we never intended to do. We didn't plan to go there. We were abducted by our CIA. So that time, they brought the pictures back in about a half an hour and gave them to us, and they drove us back to the Kensington apartment that the old gunner had. We always tried to keep that open because in case we didn't have anything else. And then another time we came out, we were picked up by the same cab driver, and this time we were the three of us together again, we were taken to another place, and I can't remember the name of the hotel. It's on the corner of Hyde Park, away from the Grosvenor House. And again, he parked his cab in front and locked it. There were other people in the lobby this time, and as we got out of the cab, we noticed that there was a big electric power vans in the back. And the big power vans had cables, big round power cables coming out of the vans, across the ground, up the side of the building, and into the fourth floor. And so we go in there to register, and they got to the desk, and the man says, he handed his keys. He says, I got you registered. We said, but our names are, he says, I know, here's your keys. And we took the keys. He said, there's the elevator, go up to the 4th floor. We went and got on the elevator, and when we got to the 4th floor, the elevator opened, and we're in a cage with iron gates on this side and iron gates on this side, and we're wondering what this is all about. And Lee says, there's a button, push the button. So I pushed the button thinking somebody would say, what do you want, or something, and there was a buzz and the gate popped open. So we went through, and when we got through, the gate swung shut behind us and locked us in. So we got our room numbers and our keys, and we went to our rooms and called the desk to find out what was going on. They said, oh, we thought we had that fixed. We'll send the repairman up. We couldn't call out of the hotel. All we could get was the desk. So the repairman came up about a half hour later. We can't go any place because the gate's locked. He came in and he fixed the telephones, he said, and he left, and we tried to call out. It still didn't work. So we called the desk again, and they said, well, we've been having a problem with that line. Try the one in the other room. So we tried that one, same thing, can't call out. He said, well, we'll get the repairman back on it again. He's busy now on something else. So the long and short of the story is they never got the telephones fixed. We had to go to the gate and call the desk and tell them we wanted to come down, go to the gate. The buzzer would sound. We could go through the gate and go down. And we decided that they're not going to let us use the telephones for some reason. And we also noticed that they had props all around the lobby there. They were shooting a James Bond film, and our man was in it, the intelligence officer. And they shot the same scene 2 or 3 times when the evening that we arrived. They shot the same scene the next morning, and they shot it again just before lunch. The big vans are out there, and then they shut that all down and put the props away. But the vans stayed, and the actors stayed in the hotel. And in the afternoon, Admiral, our intelligence officer at the time, a 3-star admiral, and his name escapes me completely, arrived in an escort of cars with security guards, drove up, and he got out and came up to a room on the 4th floor on the other side. And so we still wonder whether our being there had anything to do with him being there. But after we left that and asked people out in the street what the building was, they said, well, you don't know? We said, well, what kind of a hotel is it? They said, that's a safe house, a CIA safe house. So we were in there. And when we went down to pay our bill to leave 2 days later, the guy behind the counter said, it's all paid. Don't worry about it. And so we neither registered nor did we pay out. We stayed there for 3 days in the CIA safe house, and they drove us back to Victoria Station, and we caught the train back, the subway back to the airport. That's the kind of surveillance we were under. And one time when we were coming back out, we were coming across the continent, and the train stopped in Brussels. And Lee and I and Britt were on the train in Brussels, and Britt looked out the window, and across on the next track from us in the railroad station was signboards on a train that said Amsterdam. She said, didn't you have a case going on in Amsterdam? I said, yes, the Den Erde case. She said, well, why don't we go down and meet him? So we said, oh, why not? We grabbed our baggage, got off the train, went around the end of the platform and got on the other train, and just as we're getting on the other train, through the windows we could see the train we left pulling out. And we just got seated in the train that we had just got onto, and it pulled out. And that was in Brussels in the middle of the night. And we got to Amsterdam about 10:30 at night or something like that. And in Amsterdam, there's a shortage of hotel rooms, and after 10 o'clock, all the rooms revert to government control. We're after that time, so nothing is going to work if we don't go through the government control, which is a kiosk out in front of the main station, had 5 windows open and long queues at each window. Then we get in the shortest queue, but it's still a pretty long one, and there's a shortage of rooms, and it's slow. And as we're standing there talking and waiting to get up to the window, an American hippie girl came by with a backpack on her back, pulled Britt's sleeve, and she says, are you looking for a room? And Britt says, oh, yes, by all means. She said, well, if you'll take trolley number 13 down to the big Mercedes square on the sign on the building. It's a purple sign. She said, get off at that trolley stop, go across the street, down 4 doors on the right. You'll see a little sign over the street that says lodging. She said, I just left a room there. We said, well, we need the room with 3 beds. She says, 3 beds in the room I just left. So we went down there, followed the instructions, got there, and went inside, and we asked the lady for a room. She says, oh, we don't have any rooms tonight. We said, well, a woman just told us she left a room here. She says, oh, that. She says, that's not made up. We said, well, can we make it up real quick? She says, oh, we'll have to wait for the housekeeper. We said, well, let us have it the way it is. She says, okay. And she rented it to us, and she didn't ask for our passports or anything, which they usually do, which we thought was kind of strange. But we got up early the next morning, and we went down to the trolley station and caught a trolley to Den Haag, where Mr. Denaerde lived, and got off the trolley, and we're going to walk to his house, which is only about 3 or 4 city blocks, not very far. But as we got off the trolley at Mariahove, the station that we get off at, went down 2 flights of stairs. There's American troops all around the place, and American military vehicles. And an American sergeant stopped us and says, where are you going? He said, well, we want to visit a friend over here who lives in this residential district. He says, what are you doing? We said, oh, just visiting. We said, what are you guys doing here? He said, well, we're looking for a penetration. We said, what kind of a penetration? He said, well, there's a problem here. He said, there's a signal coming in every afternoon about 4 o'clock that we haven't been able to locate. We've got detector equipment here. We're trying to catch it and find out where it's coming from, because the signal is in a highly sensitive area where atomic warheads are stored in this vicinity. And we said, oh, we don't know anything about that. He said, well, keep an eye out. And we walked down to the house, and we were visiting Mr. Denaerde, who had been taking notes, contact notes for some time. And as we're sitting there talking to him, we asked him how he got the contact notes, how they came in. He said, I was thinking they're going to be like Mr. Myers. And he leaned back in his chair, and he said, well, I usually leave the office about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I get home, make me a cup of tea, sit down in my chair, his chair. He was a millionaire, auto parts manufacturer. And he had an arm that pulled up and swung around in the front and made a little desk in his lounge chair. And he said, I sat down here with a pad and pencil and to make notes while I'm drinking my tea. And he says, strangely, after my contacts with the aliens in the Oost shells, he said, ever since that, if I'm going to get a message at all, I get it about that time, and it comes in by a form of automatic writing in a rapid way, and he'd write pages, sometimes dozens of pages of these notes, and sometimes he'd get sketches this way. And he said it starts about 4 o'clock, runs about an hour and 15 minutes. Now we're thinking what the American sergeant told us. He says it starts about 4 o'clock, runs about an hour, and we can't pin it down. It comes in from straight down. So, and he said, we asked him, well, how do you receive it? Do you hear something in your ears or what? He said, well, when I was aboard the craft, I sat under what looked like a screen cone overhead, and he said, I heard sounds and pictures were projected on the screen. He says, now they're projected in the back of my eyes. He said, I see the images in front of me, but there's no screen. But he'd been taking these notes for a long time, and it was from those that we wrote the book Contact from Yarga, Planet Yarga. Anyway, all of this was going on around us, and on the trip through Brussels, where we changed trains unexpectedly and suddenly, where we got off the train, when we got into the case officer's office, that trip out, picked up, abducted by them again. This time when we were ushered into the office, he slammed his fist on the arm of the chair. Just what the hell do you think you're doing? We said, what do you mean? What do we think we're doing? He says, who taught you to sanitize a trail like that? We said, sanitize a trail? What the hell is that? He said, how did you give my best agents a slip? He said, there was an agent in the car on each side of you, and you disappeared in the middle of the trip, and they got off the next stop to check the car to see what happened. They got into an argument on the platform, got into a fist fight, were arrested by railroad police and taken to jail. I had to send another agent over to bail them out. I'm going to have to stop this there because we want to get these others in here. And if I'm over time, I'm sorry, Michael, but I want to introduce Michael Hessman, who has also followed up on the work that we were doing there in more recent time, and he has a whole lot new information for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendell.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much, Wendell, for your interesting memories of the early investigation of what might very well be the most important contact case in the 1970s and 80s at least, and definitely in Central Europe. So, since there was such a controversy around the Billy Meier case, we decided to reopen the investigation because of the controversy and because the situation in the meantime has changed, because many more people claim to have experiences. And I tell you, when I heard about the Meier case in the very beginning, when I was still a young investigator, I was very skeptical. I couldn't believe that indeed these amazing pictures are real. I couldn't believe that, I don't need this, I couldn't believe that, and I don't need this, I'm tall enough, and I couldn't believe that the Pleiadians are regularly contacting just a normal human being in Switzerland. So my original point of view was rather skeptical, it was rather critical. I changed my opinion totally when I met Guido Moosbrugger, who is a school professor of Austria, who was a very close friend of Billy Meier, a man I highly respect because of his personal integrity and because what he told me about his own experience was really impressive because of the great sincerity of this highly educated man. And I got the impression that indeed something real happened, and I got the impression that it is worth to look especially to the eyewitness situation. I think the eyewitness situation is the key to the Meier case, because today, in a time when everything can be faked by computer technique, by digital technology, by copying and masking and whatever, Photoshop, it is more important than ever to listen to eyewitnesses, to independent people who have experiences which very well might have changed their life. And you can manipulate every picture, but you can never manipulate the eyewitness factor. You can never, you can send some balloons up or whatever, but what these people reported have nothing to do with balloons or deception. It has to do with objects under intelligent control who perceive maneuvers which no terrestrial plane can ever imitate. And it has to do with people, several people I interviewed, and I will show you the interviews, who had by themselves encounters with the Pleiadians. By coincidence, very short encounters, but we did nevertheless have encounters. So because of this debunking effort, which was started by Mr. KKK Kalkelkov, and I will go into a little bit more details. These are his initials, I didn't make it up. KKK, Kalkelkov. It's on his book, it's not my invention. And because of the debunking effort by Mr. KKK Kalkelkov, I decided to reopen the case together with my friend Jaime Maussan from Televisa, Mexico, who for 2 times within the last year visited Mr. Meier together with me, and we interviewed dozens of eyewitnesses. I will come into more details a little bit later. In the reopening of the Meier case, we concentrate our investigation on different aspects than in the original investigation Colonel Stevens and his team made in 1978, 1979, 1980. Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So we just have to find a different angle. And they, at that time, concentrated on the investigation of the pictures, of the metal samples, and of what I call phase 3 of the Billy Meier contacts. You must understand that Billy had his earliest contacts when he was a little boy, okay, when he was 7 years of age in 1942. And this was the first phase of contact when he received all original teachings by a Pleiadian called Svat. A little bit later, Svat introduced to him a lady called Asket, and this is phase 2, the Asket contacts, which happened at a time when Billy was sent all around the planet to learn. And he visited 42 countries of the planet. Funny enough, the same number I visited. I visited 42 countries too. But he visited on a different way. He walked and he hitchhiked and he went by buses and whatever all over the Middle East. Believe me or not, but I saw the pictures as evidence. he met the brother of King Hussein of Jordan, the late great little king. Great because he was one of the greatest politicians, and little because he was really a small man, but a real great man. I have great admiration for King Hussein. And he met his brother and was his bodyguard for some time and driver. Keep in mind that Swiss people are highly respected in the Middle East because they are very professional people. They are very good in everything they do. We have a great admiration for Swiss people in Germany too. And this Billy Meier, and it's funny that his son seems to follow it, his official name is Eduard Albert Meier. But he was called Billy because he met an American lady who said, "Oh my God, you look like Billy the Kid, don't you?" And why? Because he just looked like Methuselah, his son looks today. He used to dress like a man from the Wild West, wearing black jeans, big hat, and so on and so far. And because he was very good with guns and everything, he also used to be bodyguard and driver and private investigators. And he did hundreds of jobs, literally, including working as a snake catcher in India. And when I heard this story the very first time, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it until I met a lady whose brother was taught by Billy Meier how to catch snakes. But we will come to this later. So this phase, his learning years when he traveled around the planet, mainly Middle East, is phase 2 of the context. Phase 3 is the Semyaza context, which was so carefully investigated by Wendell Stevens and his team that we don't, have to go deeper into this one anymore. It's all documented. And phase 4 is after Semyaza left the planet, the context which was still ongoing, the context with Quetzal and Ptah. And the last contact Billy Meier had just the night before his birthday on the 2nd of February 1999. So the contacts are still ongoing. And he regularly gets new information. And I tell you, the last picture of a Billy Meier ship was shot in April of 1998, not by Billy, but by a lady from Zurich, who by coincidence shot it, and I will show you the picture. And I will show you pictures of Billy Meier UFOs taken all over the planet, showing that his alleged models don't make a world tour, do they? Billy never left Switzerland in the last couple of years because for health reasons he cannot fly. That's the reason why he can't be here. But we will have him on video on an interview I made just a year ago. So you will see how he looks today. You can listen to him. We also have his most interesting films, including the complete wedding cake ship film, which was taken in 1984, and which is a very interesting piece of evidence that it is not a trash can. And I call it the trash can trash of the Fox network hoax, the greatest hoax in the history of television, as I called it before. We will come into some details of the unfortunate marriage between him and his wife, who left him because he didn't want to give all his attention to her, but he wanted to give his attention to his mission. And who now unfortunately joined with the debunkers, although I interviewed this lady personally in the late 1980s for hours and hours and hours, and she told me about all the experiences she had. And what we do have, interestingly enough, is an affidavit of Mrs. Calliope Poppy Meier, Zafiroi, which is her original name, her family name, she's Greek, but she never witnessed any manipulation in the Meier case, and she did witness the Pleiadian spaceships several times. This is an affidavit filed in Switzerland. So, since we have this affidavit, and allegedly she said something totally different to the Fox network show, I really wonder what is true. But since I talked to this woman for hours and hours and hours, I rather believe what she told me personally than in anything else. And we already found out that Mr. Karl Korff is the greatest genius of our times, and most probably the Messiah we expected for 2,000 years to come back. Since Mr. Karl Korff was able to materialize fragments of a crashed Russian UFO, which never crashed in reality, so it's a very interesting thing. In his book, we really find information which makes us wonder what kind of hidden genius he is and that he deserves the Nobel Prize. He says he did I quote from the book. This is his book. It's not worth to waste the money for it, but I quote from it. It is true that for several years I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I was one of some 10,000 people who worked there at that time. I did classified work. In fact, I worked for various federal agencies in the fields of computer systems analysis and design, computer programming, computer teaching, weapons design, weapons tracking system, and anti-terrorist and intelligence analysis, only when my country has asked me to do. What a humble man. I officially terminated my work for the United States government in January 1991 during the final days of the Persian Gulf War and Operation Desert Storm. Of course, we all know that the U.S. only won Operation Desert Storm because of Kharkov. And here you have your great national hero. The unfortunate fact behind it is that Professor Jim Deardorff of Oregon State University called Lawrence Livermore and investigated the claim that this genius, the greatest man of our times, worked for Lawrence Livermore. And they denied. So obviously, something is wrong, either with this beautiful storytelling fiction book or with Lawrence Livermore's records, but maybe the Man in Black wiped out the Lawrence Livermore records, but it's, of course, the more probable theory, because Kharkov never lies. Besides this, we have a very interesting psychological example of how people who were hurt and refused in the childhood develop a psychological complex for their life. When Wendell Stevens went to Switzerland, that several times he talked about, Kharkov was a little boy, 16 years of age. And he begged Wendell to take him to Switzerland to investigate this very interesting, amazing new case. And Wendell said, sorry, I would love to take you, but you are only 16. I can't take a kid on an investigation trip to a foreign continent. I mean, this is against the law even. He can't check, he's not a parent or whatever, and a 16-year-old boy in Europe can't check into a hotel. This is impossible. So from this moment on, Kharkov, 2 years later, published at the little publishing press of Bill Moore, the man who admitted on the Las Vegas MUFON conference that he worked for several government agencies as a disinformation agent, spreading disinformation in the UFO community, especially to discourage Paul Benowitz in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to continue investigating UFO events around Kirtland Air Force Base. This Bill Moore published a paper called The Greatest Hoax in Ufology on the Billy Meier case. And in that paper, this 18-year-old teenager described himself as research director for ufology and parapsychology of the Institute of Paranormal Sciences. Oh my God! What a genius! I repeat the title, Research Director for Ufology and Parapsychology of the Institute for Paranormal Science. Do I have to tell you that the Institute for Paranormal Science was his children's room in his parents' house? Obviously, this guy has some kind of inferiority complex to use all these titles as a little kid, but anyway, if you want to judge the research of the person, first of all, you have to judge his own credibility, his own reliability, and what he says about himself. And if this is not right, be careful with everything else he says. For example, Kharkov, on a lecture in Los Angeles where I was, claimed that he investigated the Billy Meier case so successfully because he speaks German fluently. Besides of the fact that they don't speak German in Zurich, and they speak Swiss German, which is a very special kind of German. And if for imitated now, you get an idea how it sounds to all of us, and for every German it is difficult to understand it. Besides of this fact, I went to Kharkov and said, oh, schönen Tag, schönen guten Tag, Sie sprechen Deutsch, wir können ja in Deutsch miteinander reden. What is German means, hi, you speak German, I heard, and we can talk in German, can't we? And he didn't understand one word. Later he claimed on the internet, and that's a matter of fact, this is on the records, he claimed on the internet that I don't speak proper German. May I remind you that I am German, and I spoke on German television and everywhere, so, okay, I don't speak proper German. And Things like this. Besides of this, he wrote a book on Roswell where he proved scientifically that in Roswell a Mogul balloon crashed, just like the U.S. Air Force claimed. He was on Larry King claiming that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin, the only killer of John F. Kennedy. No conspiracy involved, nothing at all, and so on and so forth. So, okay. Anyway, leave alone this guy and come to the facts. And the facts are that you were misled again by the greatest hoax in the history of American television. When you investigate the Billy Meier case, the most important thing is to talk to the witnesses, because, as I said before, you cannot fake witnesses. What we have here now is a situation of 50 eyewitnesses. We have a case with 50 eyewitnesses. And I want, just to give you an idea, and to put them in the internal Hall of Fame of ufology, I want to list some of the names, and something like 10 of them we present to you today, either on video or live here on stage. And people who saw UFOs or encountered extraterrestrials in the environment of Billy Meier's contacts, by driving out together with Billy and watching his contacts, by being with him in the farm when UFOs appeared, or something like this, are the following people. Mr. Altensberger, Jacobus Bertschinger, Eva Bieri, Bernadette Brandt, Madeleine Brügger, Harry Dicker, M. Flammer, Christina Gasser, Elizabeth Gruber, Hans Jakob, Silvano Lehmann, Ernst Kellermuller, Thomas Keller, Brunhilde Koye, Bernhard Koye, Freddy Kropf, Atlantis Meier, Gilgamesha Meier, the children of Billy, Calliope Meier, his ex-wife, who testified in an affidavit, Methuselah Meier, the young man right here, Guido Moosbrugger, Elsie Moser, Harald Proch, Margarete Rufer, Herbert Runkel, Konrad Schutzbach, Hans Schutzbach, Erich Stadtlein, Amalie Stetter, Conny Wächter, Engelberg Wächter Junior, Engelberg Wächter Senior, father and son. I have a longer list. Maria Wächter, Olga Walder, Wolfgang Witzer, Annie Zimmermann-Moosmeier, and Hans Zimmermann. And we have some more on the next page. These are all witnesses of the Billy Meier contact. Altogether, these are some of the names, altogether we have between 40 and 50 eyewitnesses. We have half of them already recorded on camera. I will go in the next couple of months to India and to record the witnesses of the contacts we had in India. These are events we want to talk about later. But before we come to the witnesses, let me show you some of the most impressive evidence of the Billy Meier case. We will see the slides later in the presentation of his son Methuselah, but I will show you some of the footage because we were able to retrieve the original 8mm film Billy shot in 1975 and 1976, and to give it back to Billy after the originals were stolen from him. So these films are in the circulation. I will show you the complete wedding cake ship and tell you why it was not a trash can. It was a trash show on Fox, but it was not a trash can lid. And then we will listen to some of the witnesses. So please put in the video, and when I said stop, we just stop the video. Okay. We show the video now, hopefully. In the Muslim world, I would say inshallah. And here we have one of the beautiful films Billy took in 1975 in an area called Berg Rumlikon, and this film was taken in June 1975. And the film you'll see after this was taken just from up there. So we have two films taken in the same general vicinity, and down here you have cars driving up and down on a kind of road. Well, this is not working. I don't know. Anyway, you have cars going up and down a road, but you have this ship here making this hovering, but making this typical floating movements, which you will see in a moment. Oh, the battery is weak, okay. Which you will see in a moment. Do we have a stronger laser pointer? Oh, this is laser. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Another laser gun. Watch the movement of the craft with floating movements, because I will show you a little later some comparative footage. Here are cars going up and down, and this is the location from which Billy took the film we see afterwards. This was a cut. It was not a movement of the craft, but a cut to a different sequence of the film. And here again, it makes some of its typical floating movements, and they have to do with the propulsion. They are riding on the gravitational waves of planet Earth, and to be in a hovering position always means a floating position, like a ship on the waves of an ocean is floating. Interestingly enough, Billy deliberately left a lot of space up here. So if this would be a model on a string, it must be a very long string. So here is the area from which he took the other film. And now you see this film also from June 1975. Here you have the craft floating. And interestingly enough, Billy took a series of photos at the very same time. And on the photos, you see a reflection of this street here on the lower side of the craft, clearly indicating that the craft was hovering beyond the street in a distance of about 300, 400 meters, what is about 900 to 1,200 feet. And again, note these floating movements, and in a moment it will shoot to the left. This is not a dematerialization. It shoots away. Very difficult to fake with the model. And in a sec later, it shoots back to this location, to the position where it was before. I was at that area together with Jaime Maussan from Televisa, Mexico in September, and we were able to measure the distances and everything, and we had a very, very interesting research trip. Here it shot back to the position with an amazing speed, and Billy is zooming into it. And here we have the same craft, and we will have an enlargement later. I made enlargement so you can see more details. But this is the original 8mm film as Billy took it. Of course, it lost a little bit of the color with the time. It was 25 years old when we retrieved it, and nearly 25, 23 actually, 23 years old when we retrieved it from, just to give Renel the information, Ewart von Hagen. You know Ewart von Hagen. And he is a nobleman, old family, one of the oldest families in Europe, who is a big admirer of Billy Meier and got a film from him. So here we have the ship closer. Again, note the floating movement. Very interesting. And here Billy zooms in. It is not the ship coming closer, but Billy zooming, because you see the cloud also gets closer. So Billy is zooming in and out, but you get more details. And keep in mind, he does everything with one arm. So, interestingly enough, this is a beautiful film taken from NASA. In 1985, in one of the space shuttle missions, STS-38, I think it was. And here we see it in an enlargement, a ball-shaped craft making the same pendulum movements we saw on the Billy Meier film. That's the reason why I'm using this film here as in comparative footage. You have the same types of floating movements. And this is a film nobody faked, unless you believe that Billy Meier was hovering in the heavens with this little model. This is another beautiful film taken in March of 1976, actually on March 29th, and at an Hasenbol area. And here you have the ship partially disappearing behind the hill. It is definitely beyond the hill. We analyzed it very carefully. And it sometimes disappears behind the hill and comes up again. So now it's moving up. Very slowly and deliberately. I mean, they can shoot away as we saw before, but deliberately, very slowly, so Billy has more possibility to film. These are mountains in the background, snow-covered mountains. And here we have Free Craft, beautiful film, also taken end of March 1976. Actually, can you turn on the audio? It has audio, and just to give you an idea how Billy edited it 25 years ago, because it's funny. I stand wherever you want me to stand. I even stand behind the truth.
Beachten Sie auf das bereits bekannte plötzliche Verschwinden der beiden Aufklärer.
But I have to see it too to explain it, so I have Billy laughed it. The good thing about the soundtrack is, because of the soundtrack, we could find out it was not edited or altered. It is still the original film. Another film from the same location, a little bit later, and you see the object here, and it's moving now from the hovering position from left to right. The film originally is much longer. I'll just show you one sequence, one example. And you see how it moved, and now compared with another
Dieser
film.
Film wurde aufgenommen am 28. März 1976
28 of March
auf
1976,
einem
Billy says.
oberhalb Fischental im Döstal, Kanton Zürich.
And now it's hovering again. And from the movement, how it really goes from the standing position to the movement back, they could analyze, the Japanese television people could analyze. It can never be a model, because a model would have some after movement, after going left and right. It wouldn't stand directly on the spot, but, you know, make some pendulum movement, and it doesn't. And now I'll show you a film taken in Mexico. I'll show you later, okay. This is first another detailed shot of the same craft on the very same day. No, the Mexico thing will come later, one moment. This is still Billy Meier on the 29th, in this case,
Hier
29th
sehen
of
Sie
March
den
1976.
Strahlschiff auf einer weiteren Filmaufnahme vom 28. März
28, okay. Wendell got it wrong in his book. I copied this from your book.
Jedoch bereits in den Abendstunden kurz vor Sonnenuntergang.
In the evening hours, just
Bei
before
diesem
sunset.
Filmteil können Sie einige wenige Einzelheiten des Schiffes
And you
erkennen.
see some details of the ship. I
unter
translate
anderem
what
auch
Billy
das
says.
langsame sich Drehen des Schiffes während
Like a
dem
slight
Flug, sowie
rotating
aber auch
movement,
das
rotational
zeitweilige
movement,
Aufleuchten
and you
von
have these
Lichtern
objects
am
here.
Schiff selbst.
And you see the slight rotation. Okay, and now I'll show you some comparison. Turn out the audio, and unfortunately it's a little bit bright. Why is it so bright? Can you make it a little bit dimmer? Darker? Can you make the image darker? It's too bright. It's too bright. Can you make the image darker? Oh, what a shame. This is the film from August the 6th, 1997, of a dish-shaped craft which makes exactly the movements like the Billy Meier ship, but you saw it at Jaime Maussan's lecture last year, and you will see it again at his lecture this year. I can guarantee you that it really makes the same kind of movements like you have here on the Billy Meier film. Here we have enlargements from the Billy Meier films. We enlarge them so you see more details. And this is again the film we saw before from June 1975 from the Berg-Rumlikon area, and you can study the movements and you can study how it is shooting away, and there was no cut. And here you have another detailed shot. This is now all edited. If the craft stops, it is just from me stopping it on the projector, on the on the recorder, but you see this beautiful original Samyaza beam ship Type 2 with the reflection here, and you can really see the shape. And this is, of course, some dirt from the film. And here we do it frame by frame. This is also frame by frame, so you'll see more details of this craft. Beautiful reflection right here. And keep the shape in mind, because in a moment we have pictures from Mexico and the USA, which are very, very similar. Note the movement. Note, but with the top, it's going left and right, which would not happen if it would be a model on the string. This picture was taken in June of 1992 near Puebla, Mexico, the same type of craft. Puebla, Mexico, also 1992, the same craft, maybe even photographed at the very same day. These are pictures taken in Mexico by independent witnesses, which have nothing to do with the Billy Meier case. They never met Billy, they have nothing to do with Figu or whatever, same type of craft. This is shot in the USA in Colorado by, was it Joe Clower? Wendell? Yeah, this is by Joe Clower. You find it in one of the calendars of Wendell. This is USA, Colorado. Another picture, Los Angeles, California, also published by Wendell, but it has nothing to do with him, of course. He got these pictures from eyewitnesses. This is a beautiful picture taken on the 3rd of March, 75 from Billy, and you have the Samyaza beam ship, and you have this small thing. This is about 4 meters in diameter. And we have the same type of craft photographed in Mexico, for example, and I'll show you the pictures in a moment. This is a picture of Mexico. You see the balls, the shape. It is not the Adamski craft. It's too flat. This is taken in Nuevo Leon, Mexico, in 1994, a picture taken by Pepe Martinez, and you see the same type of craft photographed by a totally independent witness. This is the picture from April of 1998, taken by Edith, a lady from Zurich. It's the same type of craft Billy photographed in 1975. The picture was taken in the area of Lago Maggiore. And here you compare the shape, and you have reflection here on the left side too. So on both craft you have a reflection on the left side. What I'll show you now is the film of the wedding cake ship. And in a moment it's a little bit out of focus. Can we focus it a little bit more? Here you have a tree and the wedding cake ship. And this is Billy. And we can have audio. And can you focus it a little bit? Here's Billy. You see the big distance of about 300, 400 meters. I wonder why it's not... can somebody... We can solve the problem quickly. Can somebody get from UFOs the Footage Archive Part 1 from the booth of UFO Central in the vendor's room? Can somebody of the crew get it quickly? Is anybody who can quickly run, and because this is not a good quality of it? I can zoom with this one? Are you sure? No, this is Billy made it. Okay, but anyway, you see it. And you see the big, large tree. This is a kind of pine tree. They call it weather pine tree. They are freestanding pine trees. And we analyzed it very carefully, the light reflections, everything. Here, the lower side compared to the upper side. This is a big, tall tree, and the object really is not somewhere in between, but the object really is, part one, thank you, and the object really is hovering in front of it in 300 meters distance. So this is the kind of ship they told you on the Fox Network show, but it is a trash can lid. I think it's too big for it, unless they have 7 meters wide trash cans in Switzerland. And I can ask you, Methuselah, if they have it, but I don't think so. My investigation didn't uncover such a big trash can. They're very clean people, so they need a lot of very big trash cans, but... Now, can we have the audio, because Billy is speaking on it? No audio, okay. Okay. Then we quickly solve the solution. Can it's taken on the 4th of April, 1981. Can someone, hello? If you look for 1981, 4th of April, it's on this video too. UFOs, the footage archive, you find all the films on it. So this was a commercial part of it. I want you to have it in a better quality. This is obviously not, because of the transfer to NTSC to American format, it doesn't have the clarity the original footage has, so we replace it. In the moment when our technicians are working on it, can we play fast forward until we see Billy? I want you to see and listen to Mr. Billy Meier, who unfortunately cannot be here personally, and it's good, but we have it in a better quality, so you will see it in a better quality in a moment with audio. After it comes, play fast forward. Okay, stop. Okay.
Why haven't you given interviews, or you don't want to talk publicly about what happened to you 20 years ago?
Billy, warum geben Sie
I translate, and at the end, after he spoke, I translate into English for you, so you can understand it.
Meine Aufgabe ist nicht, selbst an die Öffentlichkeit zu treten und mich bestaunen zu lassen, mich wie ein Tier begutachten zu lassen. Ich bin kein zoologisches Tier und so weiter und so fort. Meine Aufgabe liegt eben darin, die Dinge, die Berichte, die ich erhalte und die Mission, die ich habe, zu erfüllen, die Dinge aufzuschreiben, zu veröffentlichen und auf diese Art und Weise an die Öffentlichkeit zu treten, aber nicht in eigener Person. Und andererseits ist es eben auch so, wenn man an die Öffentlichkeit tritt, dann beginnen die Leute einem hochzuheben. Sie, wie wir in der Schweiz sagen, sie himmeln einem an. Und das ist nicht das, was ich gebrauchen kann und nicht das, was ich will.
Okay, I translate here from directly. We asked him why he doesn't go public, why he doesn't give interviews or something like this, why he doesn't lecture. He said, first of all, it is not his mission. He doesn't want people to admire him. He doesn't want people to look at him like a zoological animal, like something strange. His mission is to write down the messages he received and not to play any special role or to be admired or whatever. He doesn't want this. That's why he is keeping himself, his own person, in the background. And that's a very humble, normal point of view. And actually he lives a very normal life besides of being a contactee.
Ich muss das so sagen, die Menschen, die die Dinge übernehmen, was ich bringe von den Plejadiern oder einfach aus der Lehre des Geistes heraus, das hilft den Menschen weiterzudenken, sich zu evolutionieren und einen besseren Weg des Lebens zu finden, die Tatsachen zu erkennen,
to evolve and to find the meaning of life by themselves. They are not doctrines or whatever, but they put people on the path, and they are helps and instructions for people. And that's why he is doing it, why he's spreading it and publishing.
And are you happy with the experience after 20 years? Are you happy with what happened, or you think it was a failure?
Ich denke, dass alles, was sich abgespielt hat, was sich zugetragen hat in Bezug auf die Plejadier und in Erfüllung der Mission zusammen mit all den Menschen, die rund um mich sind und mit mir arbeiten, hat es sich sehr gelohnt. Und
it was worth to do. We asked, are you happy with what happened in the last 20, 25 years? And he says, yes. if I reflect what happened to all the people around me, the people who got inspired, I think it was worth to do it.
Negativ reingekommen sind, Misserfolge gebracht hätten oder dergleichen. Es ist genau das Gegenteil der Fall.
And even when we were attacked, the opposite happened of what the attackers want. And more people learned about the case and the teachings and looked at it. So all the attacks had an opposite outcome.
A positive way, a way which brought joy and support. And generally, when something negative came out from outside, it always turned to become good at the end. So generally, everything went well.
Es ist also nicht so, denn wenn Angriffe von außen kamen, dass für uns und für unsere Mission irgendwelche negativen...
If we were attacked from outside, it didn't mean a negative influence.
Es hat sich immer zum Erfolg gewandelt.
But it turned to the positive always, to the success always. As harder we were attacked, as more people we reached.
As more we were attacked, as more success we had.
Or very.
Es bedingt einfach, dass man eben bei der Sache bleibt
It's
und sich
important
nicht
to stay behind what you're doing and what you believe in
lässt, dass
and
man
what you
sich nicht
stand
ins
for,
Boxhorn jagen lässt, wenn
and
Angriffe
not
kommen
to be
von außen,
distracted,
sondern dass man einfach auf seiner Linie bleibt.
but simply to stay upon your line.
Stand behind what you believe in and don't become discouraged by attacks from outside.
Die waren niemals hier droben, die kennen mich überhaupt nicht, die haben niemals ein Wort
The people
mit
who
mir
attack
gesprochen,
him,
die haben
they have
einfach
never
alle
been
Dinge
up
aus
there,
der
they
Luft
never
gegriffen.
talked to him,
Oder
they
von
never met him in
anderen
person,
negieren,
they never interviewed the
irgendwelche
eyewitnesses,
Dinge
what is a
gehört
matter
und
of
dann
fact.
weiter negiert.
And how can they write about me if they don't never met me and don't know what is really going on?
Exactly. Either, invented the attacks or took it over from other people who attacked me before.
And many
but
of
they
the
never cared to investigate.
Meier debunkers just copied
They
from
even
each
said
other.
that you cry and you accepted that everything was a hoax.
Die Gegner behaupten sogar,
They even claim, the debunkers even claim that Billy Meier confessed, but it's a hoax, and this is his reaction, he is laughing.
Ein Wort davon.
Not a single word is true.
Well, that's what they say. But still, we know that all the analysis, the metal, the movies, the pictures, the witnesses, the sounds, everything so far has stand all these attacks.
Yeah, I know.
And after all this experience and the attacks, would you do it again?
all den Erfahrungen, den Angriffen wirklich wieder machen.
Genau dasselbe.
I would do exactly the
Ich
same again.
würde, wenn ich nochmals vorn beginnen wüsste,
If I would
und
have to
alles
start
so
from the
wüsste,
very
wie
beginning
ich es
again,
heute weiß, ich würde rein nichts ändern
I
daran. Ich
wouldn't
würde
change
auch mein
anything.
gesamtes Leben so leben, wie
I would
ich es
live all my
bisher
life
gelebt habe.
just the way
Und auch in Bezug
I lived
auf
it.
die Mission, da würde ich alles genau gleich machen.
In regard to my mission, I would do exactly what I did.
And I would do exactly the same, even if I would have known everything.
I wouldn't change
than before.
anything.
Now,
in der Form zu bearbeiten und in der Form mit ihr zu leben, wie es notwendig ist, in positiv ausgeglichenem Rahmen, dann zerstört er seine Erde nicht. Es heißt seit alters
It's about the
her,
question if man will destroy the planet. He says if man learns to live in harmony with creation and according to the laws of creation, he will not destroy the planet. All the rumors about doomsday in the year 2000, the end of the world, whatever, is rubbish. The earth will not come to an end. Even if some catastrophes happen and will happen and always happen, even if some wars will start, it does not mean the end of the world. The end of the world will come in some distant future through to the sun, which is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And one day, automatically, and it's an astronomical fact, the sun will exterminate life on Earth, and this is when man will go to other planets and settle on other planets. But this is an astronomical fact. But before it, there will be no end of the world. So do not believe in doomsday prophets and maniacs.
Wo sich der Erdenmensch irgendwelche andere Welten sucht, wo sich wieder ansiedelt.
April 1981. Okay.
Es sind also böse, negative und falsche Zukunftsvisionen, die verbreitet werden,
wrong future visions are the ones who claim that man will destroy the planet in a way that no life can exist on it anymore. This is not what the future of Earth will be, according to the Pleiadians.
Aber es führt nicht dazu, dass es eine Weltzerstörung dadurch gibt.
There will be many bad things, but not the destruction of the world.
But extinction, we're creating extinction on animals and plants.
Okay, I'll show you quickly where Billy is living. This is Hinterschmied Rüti. This is in the winter, in February, in a winter evening, beautiful landscape. This is the house where he lives. And you have visit from our investigation, Jaime Maussan. And these are some of the eyewitnesses which you will meet later, or hear about later, listen to later. And here she describes where she had a sighting. Rooney describes where she had a sighting. Rooney is the name of the lady. And you see some images from our investigation. The difference between us and the debunkers is that we really went there and we really spoke to the eyewitnesses. This is Billy's farmhouse where he and some of his friends live together, because Billy as a contactee is working for his mission all the time. Stop the image. Okay, she comes later. And he is a contactee, so he can't, have a regular job and a regular income. So some of his friends who have normal jobs just rented the house and they live there together. Billy's group has the name Free Interest Group for Spiritual and Ufological Studies, what means in German the acronym FIGO, for Freie Interessengemeinschaft für geisteswissenschaftliche und Ufologiestudien, which is really not what Karl Korff claims it is. It is really not a cult, because there's no cult in the world which would call itself Free Interest Group for Ufological and Philosophical Studies. There's no cult at all. There's no doctrine. Billy doesn't want anybody to believe in anything. What the Pleiadian teachings are all about is that every single human being must recognize that its purpose in life, its meaning of life, is evolution by recognition. Evolution by recognition, and not by believing anything. Billy is the biggest non-believer I never met. He doesn't, he doesn't teach any doctrine, and he doesn't want anybody to believe anything. This is not what the Pleiadians teach them to do. Man has to evolve, each and every one by himself. And so all the claims of the debunkers are absolutely without any fundament in reality. And do we have the film now? Can we see now the wedding cake? Okay, now we watch the wedding cake. It is not April 54, but it's April 81. Okay. 4th of April 1981, near Hinwil, the wedding cake ship, and that's what we watch right now. And then we come to the eyewitnesses we interviewed. No, this is wrong. No. It's not a Billy Meier film. April the 4th, 1981. This is Hagen, Germany. It has nothing to do with Billy. Okay, now it comes. Auenberg, Eck, Switzerland, near Hinwil, his original place where he lived. And we play it with audio, and I hope now it's in a better quality. And we can play the audio. I know this has audio. It's on a tape called UFOs to Footage Archive Part 1. And you see the disturbances. The disturbances are caused by the ship. I never saw a trash can lid causing any electromagnetic disturbances on cameras. but I mean, maybe it's new technology. Here you clearly see the ship, and you clearly see the distance. And because it's hovering there, and then, you know, it's a little bit also hiding, because here in the valley, of course, people are living, there are streets and everything. The area is not always uninhabited. Actually, Switzerland is a very inhabited country. So to find a place where you can do any demonstration flight or anything unrecognized is very, very difficult. But you hear Billy talking to, actually, interesting thing is one of the space people are standing, Quetzal is standing next to him, and he is talking to him and says, look, can you make it flying around? Can you order them to fly a little bit? And for certain reasons, they don't do. And you hear two jets flying over it, jets of the Swiss Air Force who already have it on radar. And we think this is the reason why the ship is really hiding behind the tree, to be unrecognized by these aerial surveillance which we have, by people down there. And they had to interrupt the shooting 2 or 3 times because people started to walk by. It has an audio, I know this, because I produced the film, so I don't know why we don't listen to any audio, but... This is not the original audio, but anyway.
Why isn't it wobbling like the other one?
Because it's a different ship, it has a different technology. And this one, as I say, it is just hovering close to the tree. I don't know why it is not wobbling, but you know, it is very close to the ground. It's a different ship, a different type, with a different technology. And here we made an enlargement, so you see it really clear, and you see it's something like a 3-story ship. Okay, we can stop now. We can stop this, and we continue with the other tape, because what we come to now in a moment are the eyewitnesses. I want to explain one thing. One of the main arguments of Karl Korff and the debunkers is that Billy wants to look like a prophet. That's why he is wearing a beard, a long white beard. These people never have been to Switzerland. This is a part of the tradition in Switzerland, that people living in the mountains, like farmers and so on, shepherds, are wearing long beards. Billy is a very modernized person from Switzerland, a very modernized Swiss, by wearing jeans and a normal shirt. They usually have the traditional customs, but besides this, it is just normal. Men in this age, in this area, are wearing long beards which become white sooner or later, so there's nothing unusual about it. So if we would show you images of any Swiss folklore club, you would have a Billy Meier lookalike contest. All right, so now we come to the eyewitnesses. And this is Bernadette Brandt, who is a lithograph, and she is talking about her encounter. Can we play it to the beginning of it so I can translate simultaneously? And I will read it. She will be in the original German in the background, and I translate it for you at the very same time. And she says, I was present at a contact in Schönenberg near Einsiedeln in Switzerland. We were waiting for Billy, and suddenly he stood in front of me. It was heavily raining in this evening, but we could just see how the very first raindrops were touching his jacket, when at the same time we were totally wet because it was really raining cats and dogs. He stood in front of us in the first moment, totally dry, in the biggest rain you can imagine. And he explained us that he was directly beamed down from the ship. At another time, we saw a night demonstration of 6 ships, and I had a lot of UFO sightings together with Billy. Bernadette Brandt, 49 years old, and she is a lithograph. This gentleman is Engelbert Wächter, who is a printer, and he says, one time Billy asked me if I could drive him to a contact. We drove with a car. Billy constantly gave me instructions, and suddenly he said, now you can stop. and he went out and I waited. It was quite cold. He disappeared in a forest way, and I looked around, and suddenly I saw something flickering about 300 feet away from me in the direction of the forest. In the first moment I believed it could be something extraterrestrial, but then I doubted. I said maybe it's just a farmer who is looking for his cows. I was sitting back in the car and I saw again this flickering. I wanted to know it. So I directed my car on this point, and I saw the flickering the last time, and I turned on the searchlight of the car. And I had an extraterrestrial being just in the middle of the light of the searchlight of the car. This was the first time when I saw an extraterrestrial. It was a tall man. He had a kind of cape and a flickering spacesuit, highly reflective spacesuit. He was suddenly standing still when he was running out of the light beam, and I drove back with my car, and suddenly he had disappeared. When Billy came back from the contact, he was asking me laughingly why I was disturbing harmless passers-by. This was Quetzal, his extraterrestrial contact person. This is Engelberg Wächter, 66 years old, and he's a printer. He tells another story, and one time I repaired something on the street to the center, and Billy was walking by, and I said, oh, he is walking to a contact. A short moment later, I heard a loud, energetic sound, and I believed, oh my God, now they're beaming him up. About half an hour later, I had to look on this meadow again, and I looked on it again and again. I observed it for something like 10, 20 minutes, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Billy was standing here, like if you have torn a wheel away, and there he was. From one second to the other, he was just standing there. So this is another of his beaming experiences where people see Billy just appearing out of nowhere after a contact. So he had an extraterrestrial encounter, and he had this beaming experience. And several times, he says too, several times I saw beam ships when I drove him to contact, bright ships, luminous ships, which were flying, coming from the skies and disappearing in the forest in the direction where Billy went, where Billy disappeared. Okay, can you play fast forward a little bit? Swiss German is a little bit slower than English. Okay, the next man is Silvano Lehmann. Silvano Lehmann is a waiter. He is 37 years of age. The same okay. This is Silvano, and he said, I experienced 4 assassination attempts on Billy. And this is really what made me thinking, because who wants to kill the man for 4 times? But I also had UFO experiences. One time in the year 1982, Billy called me, look, there's a ship hanging in the clouds. And I saw it totally clear and big. It was a typical beam ship like on the pictures at the bright daylight in the afternoon at about 4 o'clock p.m. And I saw it for 2 minutes until an aircraft appeared, and then it was flying away, shooting away into the clouds, and disappeared.
Beim helllichten Tag, ungefähr am Nachmittag 4 Uhr. Das war dann 1 Minute, 2 sichtbar, und dann ist ein Flugzeug erschienen am Horizont. The
next eyewitness to see after him is Atlantis Meier, 28 years old. He is a car mechanic. He is one of the sons of Billy, the brother of Methuselah. And he says, I was with my father many times when he went out for contacts. I remember how we saw the beam ships and how later we went to the contact places and we saw the landing tracks. I was very young at that time, but I remember how one day I was playing outside in front of the house and looked over the landscape and suddenly saw a ship hovering at the sky. This was hovering there for 10, 15 seconds, and then it suddenly disappeared. I was painting it at that time. I have a very clear memory, of what happened, and it was at broad daylight. So you see, the whole family testified in favor of the father, whatever the mother of both Methuselah and Atlantis might claim after the divorce. All the sons testified in favor of them. Can you play a little fast forward?
Draußen auf dem Hausplatz stand.
Okay, this lady is Eva Biri. She's the secretary. She's 43 years of age, and she says, I saw several times UFOs together with Billy in the night sky, and in the year of 1980, in the June of 1980, I listened to the sounds of the spacecraft. This was an afternoon when all of us went up to the Cadillac, which is a place where Billy took several pictures just above Hinterschmidt-Rüti, and Billy went about 150 meters or 450 feet away from us, and he made the audio recording of the sounds of the spaceship, of the beam ships, and we were standing on the way to this area, and we listened to it, and it was so loud that a lot of farmers and walkers from the area around was attracted by it and listened to it too. Another time, a couple of years ago, I saw together with Billy quite a big ship which was flying zigzag at the night sky. We will hear the sounds of the beam ship later. Methuselah will talk about his experience, and he will play it for you, so you will hear the actual sounds of a Palladium beam ship. This gentleman tells a very interesting story, because he is a friend from Billy from the very beginning on, since the early 1970s. And Jakobus Bertschinger, 48 years old, he's a driver now, and he tells the story how Billy was taken by the Palladians on his big journey through the universe, we have to say. And he says, Billy left the house in the evening, and he came back in the morning with, and I said, Billy, what happened to you? You have a beard like from 5 days. This was in 1975, and Billy was clearly shaven, clear-cut shaven, okay? He didn't have a beard in 1975 when he was still a young man, or quite young at least. The beard grew later. And so he shaved himself before he went out to the contact, and he came back in the morning, and he had a beard from 5 days. And Billy told him the story that he was taken on a trip through the universe. We will just... Okay, yeah. And he says, another time I went to Barrettsville and I drove Billy to a contact, and I was asked to wait in my car for further instructions, and then I saw how the ship was appearing from the forest clearing and was shooting over us. It was a fantastic event, and I was deeply impressed. And the last witness we have here is this lovely lady, Brunhilde Koye, and she tells the story how one night she spent in a wagon, in a motorhome, and when she visited Billy, and in the night she heard some footsteps, and she walked out and looked, and she heard something inside of her like, stop. And she stopped, but she looked around the corner, and she saw a tall person, a tall being with white hair and a beard. It was not Billy, because Billy at that time still had dark hair and didn't have the long beard yet. And I had the feeling that it was something very special. This being had a white garment and was surrounded by light, and I felt a great warmth. And later Billy told me it was Ptah, one of the extraterrestrials. And this lady, Brunhilde Koye, is a businesswoman, expert businesswoman, 64 years of age, a very educated, very respected person. I know her personally, and I highly respect her, and there's no way that these people, these good and credible people, would ever lie. Now we have the last witness, and I think You want to hear it because this is very interesting. It's about, this is Erwin Mörner. He is a UFO researcher from Winter to Switzerland. And he investigated, he checked the picture Billy Meier took in March 1976 of a beam ship and a Mirage jet of the Swiss Air Force. And he investigated it, and I read to you what happened to him because he learned about the Swiss intelligence surveillance of the case. And on a UFO Congress, I met a man who was at the Air Force, and we started to talk, and he told me he was from the Air Force, and I asked him after the picture, and he confirmed that the picture is real, and that we know everything about the context of Billy Meier. I met with this man several times, and one time he admitted to me that he belongs to the Army Intelligence, the Swiss Army Intelligence. The next time he brought a big black file, which he opened. It was a document file, a dossier, and he asked me to read it. And on the third page was the story about the Mirage meeting and photographing the Palladian beam ship. And it said, the file said, who knows about this case must keep it for himself. He cannot reveal it to the public. It is above top secret. And I asked it. I asked the person what he thinks about Billy Meier, and he replied, but at the military we know everything about it, but it is true, but the people should not know about it. Later he showed me files about my person, and I learned that they are surveilling me. They knew everything about where I was at that time, and I obviously was under surveillance from the Swiss military intelligence because I investigated the Billy Meier case. And this is Erwin Mörner, a UFO researcher from Zurich, actually from Wexikon in the state of Zurich, in the canton of Zurich, who testified and confirmed what Wendell Stevens always said from the American side.
The state project was $100 million. 1984, I built $1 million house up in Aspen, and the housekeeper had a book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades. You remember that, the picture book? I looked at those pictures. They were incredible because they were exactly the same thing I had seen 25 years before. So I grabbed my plane the next day. I flew down and I talked to Lee and Britt Elders in Phoenix, which they said they were investigating a man in Switzerland with Wendell Stevens who claimed to be in contact with beings from the star system, the Pleiades, and gave me some more of the information. And I said, well, I don't know about your story. I'm building real estate projects, but I know that picture's real. I said, what can I do? And they said, well, we need money. And I said, that's not a problem. I'll tell you, give me your proposition, which they did. So I put up the money, and 90 days later, they welched on their contract, frankly. And so what I did is file suit against them, but I was so enamored in the suit, I then grabbed a plane and I flew to Zurich, Switzerland. I knocked on the door at Billy's house. He lives about a 45-minute drive outside. And Lady Bain Bruni answered the door, and I introduced myself as George Green. I put up the money for their projects in the United States, and she says, we don't know you. All Americans are crooks. And I says, what do you mean? I says, you're supposed to be getting money from over there. That's what they told me. Well, they claimed they had never got any. I can't verify that or not. I said, look, I'm just here. I have some questions. I want to know. I have the ability and the money to help get the information out if that's necessary. Anyway, they came back about 10 minutes later and said, I'm sorry, Billy's not seeing anybody. I says, hey, end of story. My wife and I are going to take off. We're going over to Austria and have a vacation. Where's the closest hotel? So they gave it to me in Methuselah. What is that? Weila's about 15 minutes? Anyway, we went over to Weila, got a hotel, and the next morning, Bruni's knocking on my door and delivered me a 2-page message from the commander of the spacecraft, supposedly Quetzal. And it was about me personally with information that nobody on this planet knew about. Got my attention, and we come back over the next week, and frankly got my mind blown, and I made an agreement with the ETs basically to publish the information, subject to me getting rid of that contract that he had signed with Lee Elders. So I flew back to the United States, talked to my attorneys, which were the attorneys for the Screen Actors Guild. I had a house in Beverly Hills at that time, too, and it gave them the job to try to break the contract. We had it all set up, and we got Billy on the phone and told him, look, we got the thing set up. All you have to do is fly over here to the United States. Methuselah will tell you a little bit more about it later, but Basically, what occurred in that meeting with my attorneys, and we're talking to Billy in Switzerland, is Billy had, when I was there, had shown me pictures of San Francisco and the West Coast going under that he had taken pictures of. He says, I knew it was going to occur sometime in the future. I'm safe and I have 3 children. I'm not leaving Switzerland. At that point, I said, look, I got a problem. I'm in the courts all the time. I'm a real estate developer. Everybody sues real estate developers. So I said, I don't want to get involved with this thing. We'll try to set it up. There's got to be another way. So then I flew down and talked to Wendell. And Wendell, of course, couldn't do anything about it. He had other projects going on at that time, but I did agree to help him on some of his other projects and publish his material. Well, how does this all equate is, when we were there, we agreed to, with the extraterrestrials, to assist them in getting information out. When, I think Methuselah, are you going to show pictures of the wedding cake? Okay, during that time and later on, since we left there, I've been involved with the Pleiadians who are in contact with them indirectly. They've been having their spacecraft follow us around. I mean, you know, I made a deal. So what happens is that we come to the point and started looking at different devices, and that's where I'm going to shut down. I got a long story I could tell you, but we're not going to do it today. What we're looking at the wedding cake, there was, if you start looking at it for ideas of how the propulsion of these craft are and how do they run. Well, to make it simple, you set up magnetic fields. And Pat Bailey's here, who's a physicist, and we were talking about it earlier. I've run across several what we call over-unity devices. And to make it real simple so you people can see what it is, I'm going to show a demonstration now. It's on that little table over here. Now, simply what it is, everybody's familiar with refrigerator magnets. You know the little magnets that have them on top of them? You know, little animals that you put on to put your papers on them. We'll take off all the animals and you have a little square. And they're all positive and they're all negative on one side. Now, I guess I should walk over and see if that works out.
We're going to bring the images up on the screen so you'll be able to see it a lot better. It's going to be on camera. Okay. Come over to the podium to explain the part, and then we'll go back there for the screen demonstration.
Okay, I'll do it this way. This is a simple PVC, plastic vinyl. It's an old, plastic vinyl tube. We just cut it down to about 1 inch, which is the size of these little black magnets, as you've seen them. They're all glued in. They're all the same direction, the north and the south. All one side is south, other one's the north. But you're going to notice something. I don't know if you can see it or not, you will in a minute when they do the videos, there's a little hole in it. That gives the ability then from the magnet to be a horseshoe magnet itself. So we got 2 magnets within each other. Now what we also have, I want you to look at this because when you see the wedding cake, you're going to see these big round balls around the outside of it, but there's a big space. You can imagine it, you can see this thing. Now it's connected to another what we call a round magnet basically. It's just a flat banged in on both sides. Now what I've done is glue just a plain old steel ball, the old pinballs, to the bottom so you can get an idea of what it is. End of story. Now you want to see what happens. Now what you have to do is start thinking of the possibilities by using a simple device this. We were looking at doing it commercially, which we do have it done, but the people that put it together originally have been shot at a couple times and it's not right. So why don't we make a toy so everybody can at least think about it? Do you understand? Okay, now I'll go make the thing so you can see how it works.
Okay, now we'll bring it up on the screen. You notice the gap that he has in the magnets, in the ring of magnets. And he's going to put that ring down over the other slice of a bar in German. And at that point, I'm going to have to back up again here because the first time we went there, and I had this lady friend that thought she was psychic, and I had been corresponding. I want to get this real straight because I want it to be fact. And after the first visit, I'm going to have to back up a little bit more because how I got involved, and I'm sorry for the confusion here, but I had been exchanging and collecting UFO pictures for years. And one of my correspondents was Lou Zinstag. She was the niece of Carl Jung. She was the first UFO researcher well recognized in her part of Europe. She published the first UFO journal in Europe on UFOs in German, published in Basel. So I had been in contact with her exchanging pictures, and she called me one day and she said, I have just discovered a set of pictures I think you will find very interesting, and I'm going to come to the United States next month because I'm writing a book together with Timothy Good on the Adamski case, and she said, we're going to have to come to California anyway, and if you'll meet us at the bus station when we come through, I'll show you the pictures. So I said, fine, let me know when you're in New York, and I'll meet you. And I did, brought him out to the house. Happened to be Lee and Britt Elders were at my house at the time that I got the call there at the bus station. I went down and picked him up, brought him back out, Timothy Good and Lou Zinstag. And when we got to the house, she opened her purse and spread out 12 photographs. She says, what do you think of these? Those pictures were the best pictures I had ever seen of UFOs. And up to that time, I had come to believe that a very good picture was very suspect because most of the pictures were taken with cheap cameras with no preparation, happenstance that occurred suddenly, an accidental picture, and posed pictures were clearly fakes. But they were so good and so pretty, I wanted to believe that they were true, and I wanted to get more information on them. So I asked her if she could put me in touch with the author of the pictures, and she said, well, he doesn't speak any English, so if you write me the letter you want to send to him, I'll translate it to German, send it to him, have him send the reply back, and I'll translate that back to English and get you the answer. Well, I did this 2 or 3 times in quick succession, and she said, oh, my, you're overwhelming me. I'm going to have to ask you to use a friend of mine. And she gave me the name of Ilse von Jacobi, who was also an international journalist, spoke, read, and was fluent in 5 languages. Ilse von Jacobi translated 2 or 3 more letters for this way, and by this time I've got to go see Mr. Meier face to face, and then the income tax refund arrived in the mail, and I told my friend, I said, let's go. So we took an airplane out to Los Angeles, waited at the airplane, bought Laker tickets, waited at the airport, got on the airliner and went, and now we're in Zurich where we rented the car. And my friend was psychic to some degree. Ilse von Jacobi said she was psychic. We got no map. We don't know where we're going. So we start out with the car, and we get to Winterthur. We know that's on.
We're in for an extraordinary afternoon. And to start it off, ladies and gentlemen, here's Wendell.
Thank you very much. As usual in the events like this, something turns up at the last minute that we want to share with you, and that has happened today. We have a gentleman that came into the building here last night, as a matter of fact. He's shown us a free energy device. He got the idea after a visit to Switzerland with Billy Meier and some contact with Pleiadian entities. And so we're going to start out by introducing Mr. George Green, and then we'll bring his demonstration up on the screen here so you all can see it. This will only take a couple minutes, and then we'll proceed on from there. So one other thing I want to advise, I want you to all know that we are videotaping the audience for reaction today. I hope you don't mind. If anybody objects, come up and let us know. But we need this to cut audience impressions into the editing at a later time. So cameras are on you. Thank you very much. And George Green.
Thank you, Wendell. I was asked to give you guys a little indication of how I got involved with the Billy Meier story. I will give it to you real quick. In 1958, I was stationed in the military at Edwards Air Force Base. I did the post-flight inspection one morning on the X-15. I finished doing that, went to the north end of the runway. There was 3 hangars that I hadn't got into. Inside was a circular disc about 25 feet across, silver in color. A little unusual. I was 19 years old, but I had just been working on the super secret equipment that we had. I come back and asked my CO about it, and he said it was an ion-powered craft designed by Sikorsky for use in outer space. I accepted what he said because it made sense. I went back and asked my friend, who happened to be the base photographer, to get me some pictures of that craft. And he said, what did they tell you? I told him, and they basically said that's not true. Proceeded to show me pictures of the 2 dead aliens, who were humanoid looking, but obviously not me. So I immediately went back and confronted my commander and asked him why he didn't tell me the truth. And he said, when the government's ready to tell the truth about UFOs and ETs, they will. Until then, you'll be stick to that story. I was reminded that that weekend was Armed Forces Day, which they opened up the base, and if any of the civilians would happen to see the craft, I was also supposed to give them the Sikorsky information. Anyway, within 10 days, I was transferred off the base. I didn't say another word about it. I was a good, if you want to call it, military person. I spent a little over 4.5 years, got in, got out of the service, became pretty successful in the game of Monopoly. I have a background in law, business, real estate development. I've built in 22 states. My last real estate...
magnet glued onto a ball. We're going to have it on the screen here if you watch up here. And when he does this and gets it centered, the ball is the little ball inside, and the disc will revolve by themselves, and they'll revolve perpetually. It's being done strictly by magnetic power. There you can see it, which tells us that free energy is infinitely simple. It's just the interrelationship of magnetic fields, and that's what he's demonstrating. Thank you, George. Okay, this time I'm going to do things. Did you get to see it? Okay, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I usually have a list of things that I'm going to do. This time it's going to be pretty much extemporaneous because I'm going to tell you some things that we never published. We don't like to introduce ourselves into a case, and so we didn't publish what was happening to us as we are investigating the case. And one would think that we would be pretty free to do what we wanted to do, which wasn't the case. We were picked up every single time by American intelligence. Now I'm going to walk around a little bit so I don't get all in one place, if that's okay here. When I went to Switzerland the first time with a lady friend that was psychic. Billy Meier had been living in Hinwil, Switzerland, a little town south in the southern part of south of Lake Zurich, and we did not have an address. I had a mail address, but it was in Hinwil, and he had moved. So we had gotten our income tax refund back, and we bought cheap tickets on Laker Airlines to go to London and then the train back up to Switzerland. Now, Laker Airlines didn't have a schedule at that time. They sold tickets till they filled an airplane, the airplane took off. So here we are now, we're going to go, and if anybody's following us, he's certainly going to have a hard time. But I don't think they were following us that time. But that's the way it worked. And when we got to Switzerland, we got off got to Zurich, we rented a car, and we headed out for Hinwil, trying to find where Meier lived now. We knew that he lived at a place called Hinterschmidruti, but the Swiss, very few Swiss knew where Hinterschmidruti was, because that means behind Schmidruti. And we were looking for, they thought, and we thought we were probably mispronouncing it, that we were looking for a town of that name, and we kept getting wrong directions until we finally found little board signs with arrows on them that said Schmidruti. And we went to Schmidruti, and when we got there, we asked them where Hinterschmidruti, they said, just back there. So we said, what's back there? They said, take the road down. It was a dirt road running from, Hinterschmidruti is a crossroads with no more than 8 or 10 buildings in it. That's a town. And they said, go down the dirt road. He said, do you know where Mr. Meier lives? I said, oh, yes, he gets his mail right here. Here's the post office. Just go down the road. There's the first house on the left. So we went down there, walked down the trail, and got there, and sure enough, we were at Mr. Meier's house. So the next time, and I talked to him for that, well, I talked to an interpreter at that time because I didn't